I told you I did not want another child. See how you're looking, ugly and fat, because of a common pregnancy. Are you the only pregnant woman in this town? If you can't look beautiful while pregnant, then find a way to get rid of it. I don't think I can tolerate you for another week like this, he finished, his words laced with venom. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. My name is Grace. I'm a graduate of Sabak University, and I got married to Victor when I was just 19. I was the first among my friends to wear the white veil and walk down the aisle. At the time, it felt like a fairy tale. Now, 5 years later, I stood in my own kitchen feeling like a stranger in my own home. I'm carrying your child, Victor, I whispered, my voice trembling. Our child,
He scoffed.
your child. I never asked for another one. You should have known better. I looked down at my swollen belly. This baby, though unplanned, had already begun to grow inside me like a quiet hope. My daughter, Hope, was just 3 years old. She had already started patting my stomach, talking to baby, kissing it good morning. Do you think I planned this? I finally said, my voice rising despite the tightness in my chest. Do you think I wanted to go through the nausea, the back pain, the sleepless nights, just for the fun of it? He didn't answer. He just walked away, leaving silence hanging in the hot afternoon air. I sank into the chair, tears rolling down my cheeks, not just from the pain of his words, but from the loneliness they left behind. How had we gone from lovers to strangers? Days passed in a haze of nausea, fatigue, and silence between Victor and me. Then, one morning, my daughter came into the room, her small hands clutching a crumpled drawing. Mommy, this is you, me, and baby, she said proudly, her voice a beacon of innocence in a house full of shadows. I smiled, though it was a bittersweet smile. This wasn't the life I had imagined for her. I held her close, her tiny arms wrapping around my neck. That day, I made a promise to myself, and to the child inside me, that no matter what happened, I would choose love. I would choose strength, and I would choose to never let someone else's brokenness define my worth. But who would have thought that my pain is about to get worse? If this story is powerful or relatable, comment 1. If not, comment 0 below. The next morning, I had barely opened my eyes before my stomach twisted again. I bolted out of bed, barely making it to the bathroom before everything I had eaten the night before came rushing at my throat. It had been like this for days now, no, weeks. The nausea came in waves, unpredictable and violent. My head spun constantly, and the fatigue clung to me like a second skin. I could barely stand for 10 minutes without needing to sit down. From the bed, Victor groaned loudly. Again? You're vomiting again? I flushed the toilet and leaned my head against the cold tile. I can't control it, I whispered, too weak to argue. He sat up and glared at me as I staggered back into the room. This is what you chose. You wanted this child. Now deal with it. Don't turn this house into a sick ward. I sat on the edge of the bed, dizzy and trembling. I didn't choose this. It just happened. Stop lying to yourself, he snapped. You're just like your mother, always looking for pity. That woman raised you to be soft and manipulative. I turned to him, my eyes stinging. Don't talk about my mother like that. Why not? He said, standing up and towering over me. She's the one who rushed you into marriage like it was some achievement. Now look at you, vomiting every hour, smelling like bile, and dragging yourself around like an old woman. You're a disgrace. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the panic rise like water in a glass. Please, I just need to lie down. You've been lying down all week, he shouted. Do you think I want to come home to a wife who can't cook, can't clean, and can't even dress like a woman anymore? Look at you, headscarf, stained wrapper, swollen face. Who would even believe I have a wife in this house? His voice echoed through the room. The neighbors probably heard, but no one would come. They never did. Respecting a man's home was more important than protecting his wife. I thought of my mother, how she always smiled through pain. How she once told me, marriage is not sweet every day, my daughter, but love must lead, even in the storm. Was this love? Was this a storm or a slow drowning. Later that afternoon, I called my mother. "Mama," I said, voice cracking as I lay curled on the rug, too weak to sit up. "I can't do this." "What is it, my child?" she asked. I could hear her worry. "How is the pregnancy?" "It's hard, Mama. I'm sick. I can't eat. I can't sleep. And Victor, he blames me for everything." There was silence for a moment. Then she said gently, "Do you want me to come?" Before I could answer, Victor snatched the phone from my hand. "She doesn't need you here," he barked into the receiver. "Don't interfere in my home, Mama Grace. She chose to marry me. Let her face what marriage is." My mother tried to speak, but he ended the call. I stared at him in shock. "Why would you do that?" "Because your mother will not dictate how I run my home," he shouted. "If you had any respect for me, you would never call her in the first place." Tears streamed down my face, not just from the pain in my body, but from the isolation settling around me like thick fog. That night, I slept on the living room floor, too afraid to lie beside him. My daughter came to me in the dark, curled beside me, and whispered, "Mommy, are you sick again?" I nodded, unable to speak. She placed her tiny hand on my belly and said, "Mummy, sorry." And just like that, I cried, silently, brokenly, because in that moment, I realized I was carrying two lives, my child and my pain. How I wished the humiliation and pain was only from Victor. How can a pregnant mother face domestic abuse and public insult? The sun was already high in the sky when I stepped out of the house, one hand supporting my belly, the other holding a small nylon bag with my faded antenatal card. Sweat clung to my back like a second skin. My legs were heavy, my slippers thin and worn, but I had no choice. Victor had left early that morning, not even looking at me. I had asked him for money to buy the delivery kit the hospital had insisted I bring before my next appointment. He laughed bitterly and said, "Go and beg your mother. I've done enough." It wasn't the first time he had said something like that. He had plenty, a new motorcycle, a flashier phone, but when it came to basic needs for me and hope, he always had an excuse. His control over us wasn't about money. It was about power. So I walked. From our house to the junction was over 40 minutes on foot. The soles of my slippers were worn thin, and I felt every step drag my weary body further. A woman selling oranges handed me a bottle of water, giving me a look I had grown too used to, pity, mixed with something deeper, something that made me wish I wasn't visible. Victor had recently spent money on a motorcycle, but here I was, pregnant, sick, and walking alone. He always had an excuse when I asked for help. It wasn't poverty, it was neglect. At the junction, I waited under the sun until a battered taxi finally stopped. "Government hospital," I said, panting. 200 naira, the driver replied. I counted the coins in my palm. 150. "I have only this," I begged. He looked at my stomach, hissed, and waved me in. "Make sure you come down quick. I don't have enough time." The drive felt like forever. Every bump made my back scream. But when I finally walked through the gates of the hospital, I felt a strange kind of relief. Maybe today would be different. I was wrong. "Where's your money for the delivery kit?" the nurse at the front desk asked without looking at me. I couldn't afford it. I just came to see the doctor." She looked up sharply. "So, you intend to deliver with your wrapper and prayers when you're due for delivery?" Laughter rippled from two other nurses nearby. "Madam," another nurse added, "next time you decide to get pregnant, make sure your husband has at least $20. You people think childbirth is charity work." I swallowed hard, cheeks burning. "Please, I'm begging. I just want to speak with the doctor." She rolled her eyes. "Go and sit there. Wait for when we're free." I sat on the metal bench in the hallway, surrounded by women with swollen feet and heavy eyes. My body ached, but my spirit ached even more. Then, a well-dressed woman approached me. She wore a navy blue skirt suit and carried a folder. Her smile was too bright for the hospital's faded walls. "Hello, dear. I'm from Safe Hope Initiative, an NGO that supports pregnant women in distress. One of the nurses mentioned your case." I blinked in disbelief. You want to help?" She nodded. We'll take care of your hospital registration, delivery kit, and follow-up care. We just need you to sign a small consent form for our records. Nothing complicated. She handed me a document filled with fine print. I could barely understand half of it. What does it say? I asked quietly. Just your agreement to let us support you. That's all. You'll also be enrolled in our maternal wellness program. It's standard procedure. I had so many thoughts. I thought of my baby. I thought of Hope. I thought of lying alone on that cold floor at night. I hesitated before I signed, the pen feeling like a weight in my hand. I had no real choice, not with the pregnancy draining my strength and my mind clouded with fear. Good girl, she said, giving me one part of the document, not noticing the tension in my shoulders. We'll process everything. Just focus on staying strong. But as she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I didn't know what it was I had agreed to, but the fine print seemed like a trap I was too desperate to avoid. If this story is powerful or relatable, comment 1. If not, comment 0 below. When they gave me the delivery kit, I smiled for the first time that day, though a small voice deep inside me whispered, "Nothing comes free." But I silenced it. I was too tired, too broken, too desperate to question mercy. So I walked out of that hospital with a small plastic bag containing the delivery kit and a document I hadn't read. Victor is not a generous giver. How will he react when he finds me with the delivery kit? I was overwhelmed with thoughts of what his reaction would be. By the time I got home, my legs were trembling beneath me. The sun had scorched me black, the heat sinking into my bones. My plastic hospital bag dangled weakly from my hand. Inside it, the delivery kit that had cost me more than just money. Mummy. Hope came running from our neighbor's porch barefoot, her dress stained with mud water. I'm hungry. I bent down slowly, gathered her into my arms. I know, baby. I know. Let's get something to eat. As I turned toward the door, I heard the familiar slam of Victor's slippers behind me. He stepped out from the corridor with a look that froze my breath. So you're back, he said, eyes narrowed. With a hospital kit. I didn't reply. I didn't want another war. Where did you get money, Grace? His voice was rising already. You've been crying about not having money, but now you come back with hospital things. Who gave it to you? I got help, I said softly. An NGO at the hospital offered. He stepped closer, cutting me off with a wave of his hand. NGO, he sneered. You think I'm stupid? You're out there parading yourself with this pregnancy, like a badge of honor. Is it one of your lovers that gave you the money? Tell me now. My hands tightened around Hope. He pointed to my belly. I don't even know if that child is mine anymore. The way you move around, always looking for sympathy. Who knows who you've been sleeping with? Don't talk like that, Victor. I said, my voice barely a whisper. You know I would never. Oh, I know nothing, he snapped. Maybe you stole my money, eh? You think I didn't notice that $100 was missing from the drawer? I didn't touch your money, I cried. You didn't. He barked out a bitter laugh. Then what? Angels dropped the delivery kit for you from heaven? I stood there, my heart racing as Hope clung to me, sensing the tension in the air. I could hear the faint rustling of the document from the NGO, tucked inside my scarf beneath my wrapper. I had hidden it away, hoping that Victor would never find out. But now, as he stood there accusing me, I knew the truth was closing in on me. I couldn't hide the fear in my chest, nor could I ignore the weight of that signature. I'm not answering any more of your questions, I said quietly, walking into the house. Oh, now you have courage, he shouted behind me. It's men giving you boldness, right? I said nothing. Hope's tummy growled. I set her down and went straight to the small pot on the floor, the leftover rice from 2 nights ago. I added a splash of water, lit the kerosene stove, and waited. Mummy, will we eat egg? Hope asked with tired eyes. Not today, I said softly, stroking her head. We ate from the same plate, silently, her small fingers chasing the last grains of rice while my heart chased peace. I didn't touch the kit. I didn't open the bag. I didn't breathe near the wrapped document I had hidden under the bed. The truth was, I had gladly signed that form. I had smiled when I did. But now, the weight of that signature felt heavier than the child growing in my womb. As Hope licked the spoon and leaned on me, her eyes already closing, I stared at the floor and tried to think of what to cook for dinner. But nothing came to mind. The house was unusually quiet that evening. Victor was sitting in the plastic chair outside, tapping his phone with unusual interest. Hope was asleep on the mat beside me, her mouth slightly open, her thin arms wrapped around my waist. I rubbed her back gently, trying to ease the ache in my own body. Then I heard Victor's voice change, brighter, warmer.
"Ah,
Sister Gloria. It's been long, oh," he said, almost laughing. I looked up sharply. From where I sat, I could only hear his side of the call, but something in his tone made me listen harder. "Yes, now, this is your brother you're talking to," he said proudly. "You're always welcome here. The house is your own." There was a pause, and then he added, Yes, we have space. Come and rest, even if it's for 2 weeks or more. Just come." He chuckled. "Grace will be fine. She's here, managing herself." I sat up a little, adjusting Hope's head so she could sleep more comfortably. Sister Gloria. I had heard of her, of course. Victor's only sister. The one who raised him after their mother died. She was older, unmarried, and known in their village for being a strong woman. Strong and blunt. Still, my heart lifted. Maybe, just maybe, someone would finally talk sense into Victor. Maybe a woman like Sister Gloria could remind him what it meant to be human. That night, after Victor came in, I asked gently, "Is your sister coming?" He looked at me without emotion. "She'll be here tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to pick her up from the park." I nodded. "It will be nice to have her here. Maybe she can help." "Help with what?" he asked sharply. "Just with the house. With Hope. With things." He didn't answer. He just turned and entered the bedroom. The next day, by mid-morning, I swept the front of the house and aired out the room she would stay in. I washed the curtains, wiped the floor, and even put water on the fire to boil for her bath. In spite of everything, I was excited. At 2:17 p.m., I had a sound of a taxi drop someone outside. Then a woman stepped in. She was tall and fair-skinned, with wide eyes and tightly tied headscarf. She walked with the confidence of someone who didn't ask permission to exist. "Good afternoon, Ma." I greeted quickly, wiping my wet hands on my wrapper. She gave a tight smile. "So, Your Grace." "Yes, Ma." She looked me up and down, her eyes pausing briefly on my belly. "I heard you're expecting." "Yes, Ma. In a few weeks." She smiled again. "God will help you deliver safely. You look tired."
"Sit down."
"You don't need to do too much. Pregnancy is not a punishment." I blinked. "That was kind. Thank you, Ma." Victor was already bringing in her bag, beaming like a child reunited with his favorite teacher. "You see the way my sister is shining?" he said, laughing. "She doesn't age." Gloria chuckled. Grace, better treat my brother well, You know I don't joke with him." "I'm trying my best, Ma," I said, forcing a small smile. She reached into her bag and handed Hope a pack of biscuits. "And this must be my niece. Beautiful girl." Hope grinned and took it shyly. "Thank you, Auntie." All the signs were there. Polite, thoughtful, pleasant. But as Gloria turned to enter the room we had prepared, something in her eyes flickered, just a little too sharp, a little too cold. And when she passed by me, I thought I heard her whisper, just barely audible, "Let's see how long this tired act lasts." I froze. Her voice had dropped, a sharp edge to it I hadn't noticed before. There was no need to ask who she was pretending for. She knew what it meant to be in control, and now she was playing a different game. But when I looked up, she was already smiling again, asking Victor for chilled water. And I realized, if Victor was fire, his sister had brought the fuel. The real storm had just stepped into my home. That evening, after Hope had gone to bed and the heat of the day had finally loosened its grip on the house, I overheard Victor and Sister Gloria talking in the sitting room. I was in the kitchen, peeling some half-soft plantains we had left from the market 2 weeks ago. The light from the small rechargeable lamp flickered, but my ears were sharp. "So, how's your work?" Victor asked, stretching out in his chair. Oh, work is fine, Gloria replied, her voice calm and confident. I've been assigned more outreach lately. I'm now a mobilizer for Safe Hope Initiative. Safe Hope? Victor asked, curious. Yes, she continued, adjusting her wrapper. We focus on women's health, mostly pregnant women and nursing mothers. Some of us visit daycare centers and orphanages too. We support them, provide basic care, and sometimes do follow-up visits. Victor gave a grunt. That one fits you well. You've always liked being in control. Gloria laughed. It's not about control, Victor. It's about impact. Some of these women are completely abandoned. No food, no help, no support. He grunted again. I don't even want to hear about pregnancy. It's too much stress. One child is enough. See the way my wife is looking, like she's carrying twins with her whole body. I told her I didn't want this second one. There was a pause. Then Gloria said, but it's already here. The belly is big, and the child is coming, whether you like it or not. Victor said nothing. Maybe you should prepare yourself, she added. These things don't just go away. I'm not the one who should prepare. Let her prepare herself, he muttered. The next morning, I was washing clothes outside when I noticed Gloria walking toward me, a small cup of tea in her hand. Her steps were slow, almost thoughtful. Good morning, sister. I greeted her. Morning, Grace, she said, sipping gently. Hope you slept well? I nodded. Yes, Ma. She looked at my belly. You're almost due, right? When is your next hospital appointment? I hesitated, then replied. Next week, Wednesday. They said I should come early. Good. Don't miss it, she said, her eyes still on me. Safe delivery is not something to joke with. Yes, Ma. I plan to go. She smiled just a little. You know, pregnancy is a blessing. You should take care of yourself more. Eat well. Rest. This baby might be the one to change everything for you. I stared at her for a moment. Her tone was soft, but I couldn't read her face. Thank you, Ma, I said finally. She looked around and leaned closer. You know I'm here for both of you. Victor is my brother, but you are his wife. I'll do my best to support you. Both of you. I nodded, unsure what to say. Just rest more, she added. And don't worry about his moods. He'll come around. Then she turned and walked back into the house. But something didn't sit right. She asked about my baby, but not like someone who cared. More like someone watching, waiting. For what I didn't know yet. All I knew was that her presence in my house was not ordinary. And whatever she wanted, it had something to do with my unborn child. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the sun had turned everything into a furnace. I was at the back of the house, rinsing some bitter leaf, when I realized I had forgotten Hope's immunization card in the inner pocket of the old hospital file. I hurried inside to get it. As I stepped in quietly, I saw the door to our shared room slightly ajar. I stopped. Inside, Sister Gloria was sitting on the edge of my mattress, my hospital file open in front of her. She flipped through the pages carefully, my prenatal records, the doctor's notes, the list of essential items the nurse had written out, and then the folded white paper tucked neatly in the back. The NGO document. The one I signed at the government hospital. My heart started pounding, but I didn't move. I turned back, went to the kitchen, picked a cup noisily, and walked toward the room, pretending I hadn't seen anything. As I entered, she turned abruptly. Grace, she said, too quickly. I was just cleaning up. I gave a small smile and pretended not to notice the half-closed file on her lap. Oh, thank you, Ma. I've been meaning to sort that out. She stood and brushed her gown. This hospital's here. They keep giving you people long lists. How are you managing all this? I'm trying my best, I replied. God is helping me. She looked at me thoughtfully. By the way, have you registered with any NGO? I hesitated. Why do you ask, Ma? She waved casually. Nothing serious. Just. I know some NGOs help women like you. Sometimes they provide free delivery kits, but they can be tricky. You have to know people. I nodded slowly. Yes, Ma. The hospital helped me connect with one. Something flickered in her eyes. She didn't speak immediately. Then she smiled tightly. Really? That's good. That's very smart of you. But her voice was cold. That evening, I heard her whispering with Victor again. They didn't know I was behind the curtain, folding Hope's clothes. I'm telling you, that girl is hiding something, Gloria said. I saw her hospital papers. There's something fishy. She's doing things behind your back. What things? Victor asked, suspiciously. She said she registered with some NGO. Gloria continued. What for? Who's helping her? Where is the help coming from? Who's paying? And why didn't she tell you? Victor hissed. That's true, oh. She thinks she's smart. Exactly. You're the man of this house. She shouldn't be making decisions behind you. If care is not taken, that baby she's carrying may not even be yours. I covered my mouth in horror. That night, Victor refused to eat the yam porridge I prepared. You think you're wise, he barked. Registering with NGOs, accepting help behind my back. Who are you planning with, Victor, please, I tried to explain. The hospital insisted. I didn't know how to pay for the kit. I was desperate. So now you've sold yourself for a piece of kit, he shouted. Before I could say another word, his hand struck my shoulder, pushing me back toward the wall. My head hit the frame of the door, and the sharp sting made me dizzy. Hope began crying from the mat. Victor, please, I whimpered. She's watching. But he spat on the ground and stormed out. Later that night, after Victor had stormed out, I pressed a cold cloth to the swelling bruise on my cheek, my vision blurry with tears. I had barely recovered from the shock of his slap when Gloria appeared in the doorway. She looked at me, eyes cold, calculating. Next time, think twice before doing things without telling your husband, she said, her voice as smooth as silk. I nodded, but something deep inside me screamed in protest. This was more than just advice. It was a warning. She turned and walked away like nothing happened. But I knew it had changed. The woman in my house didn't just want to help. She wanted control. And now, she was using Victor as her weapon. The days turned darker in the house after that night. Victor had grown colder, harsher. And Sister Gloria? She moved through the house like a shadow, always watching, always whispering. Every morning, I woke with a new ache, either from Victor's blows or from the weight of this pregnancy that now felt more like a punishment than a blessing. Why do you keep going to that government hospital? Victor snapped one morning as I knelt to pack Hope's school bag. Don't you understand English when I say stay away from there? I looked up startled, but that's where my file is. The doctors know my condition. Are they the ones feeding you? He barked. Are they your husband? No, but... A sudden slap silenced my words. I staggered back, holding my cheek, blinking back tears. From today, you're not going there again. And cut off all contact with that useless NGO. Whatever agreement you signed, break it. I stared at him, afraid to speak. Then he narrowed his eyes. What's even the name of that NGO? I hesitated. Safe Hope Initiative. He frowned. Safe Hope what? Safe Hope Initiative. I repeated, barely audible. Then, as if thinking aloud, he muttered, but that's the same NGO Auntie Gloria is mobilizing for. I froze. He quickly turned away, realizing what he'd just said. But it was too late. I stared at him in shock. Sister Gloria works for Safe Hope? The same NGO that made me sign those papers at the hospital? Questions began swirling in my head, faster than I could catch them. Why had she pretended to be surprised when I mentioned the NGO earlier? Why did she ask if I was registered? And why was she now pushing Victor to sever all ties with them? That night, I couldn't sleep. The baby rolled gently in my belly, as if sensing my unrest. I watched the ceiling, my mind racing. The next morning, while Gloria and Victor were out, he had taken her to town on his motorcycle. I rushed to my hidden folder and brought out the document I had signed. There was a logo, 2 hands cradling a mother and child, with the name Safe Hope Initiative printed at the bottom. The address listed led to a block office across town, but I'd never been there. Everything had been handled through the hospital. I decided to ask Mama Sarah, the elderly woman who sometimes sold herbs by the corner. Safe Hope, she said, her brows furrowing. They offer help to children and pregnant women, but not all help are genuine. But I don't trust their coordinator. That woman behaves very suspicious sometimes. I nodded slowly, pretending not to care much. Later that week, I also asked the young nurse at the clinic quietly. They're a partner NGO, she whispered. But some of us don't know their full activities. They only tell us what to collect. You're not the only one they made to sign that document. My heart sank. I had signed that paper without reading everything. All I wanted then was a safe delivery kit, and now I had no idea what I had agreed to. And worse, Sister Gloria knew. She knew everything, and had said nothing. Now she was planting words in Victor's head to isolate me further, and maybe to keep me from finding out the truth. That evening, while I stirred watery rice for Hope and myself, I caught Gloria watching me from the corridor. Her eyes were calm, but her face held something else, something unreadable. She gave a small smile. How's the baby today? Fine, Ma. I lied. But inside me, fear had taken root. If Safe Hope Initiative was her ground, then I was standing right in her trap. And somehow, I had to find a way out. The moment Victor muttered that Safe Hope Initiative was the same NGO Gloria worked for, something deep inside me refused to stay quiet. I began to dig. At night, when Hope was asleep and Victor was at the local beer joint or snoring away on the mat, I would use my neighbor's teenage son's phone and sneak into forums and message boards. I typed slowly with trembling fingers, spelling out the words Safe Hope Initiative complaints. The results were scattered, some in old blog posts, others buried deep in forums hosted by women who had once trusted the organization. One woman wrote, "They came to our hospital offering free food and medical care for my twin boys." I signed. Weeks later, both developed seizures. One died within months. The other is blind now. No one took responsibility. Another read. Safe Hope sponsored my niece abroad. She was meant to be adopted. We've not heard from her in 3 years. They say she's doing well. We don't even know the country she was taken to. I read post after post. Reports of mothers offered infant formula and vitamin injections whose children later developed tumors. A clinic in another state was shut down under mysterious circumstances after 3 babies died within the same week during a nutrition trial. Some of the women mentioned that Safe Hope's hospitals looked sophisticated, but only allowed in mothers who had signed their consent forms. And the orphanages? Multiple reports hinted at trafficking, children taken abroad for educational opportunities or better care, never to be heard from again. Some whistleblowers said Safe Hope was a front for clinical trials run by major pharmaceutical companies, testing unapproved drugs on poor children in the name of care. Others alleged organ trafficking. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls of our one-room apartment began to close in on me every time I saw Gloria pass by with her big smile and calm voice. What was she doing here? Did she know? Or worse, was she part of it? What did she stand to gain? I tried to remain normal during the day, but my heart pounded every time she looked at Hope. Every time she offered to carry her. I started hiding Hope's plate of food, sleeping with her tiny body tucked beside me like a shield. Then one evening, while Victor was unusually calm, sipping a glass of water on the chair outside, I sat beside him and tried to explain. "Victor, there's something you need to know about Safe Hope." He squinted at me. "Which one again?" I think they're dangerous. The NGO, the one Gloria works with. I read things. Women whose babies fell sick after taking help from them. Some children disappeared. He stopped chewing. "What are you saying?" "Please, just hear me out. They pretend to help, but there's something evil behind it. They do things to children, even organs." He dropped his cup and stood abruptly. "You're mad." "No, Before I could finish, his palm cracked across my cheek with a fury I hadn't seen before. "You're accusing my sister of selling children. You want to spoil her name in this house." I backed away, shielding my belly, but he came again, this time kicking the stool near me and sending it crashing against my leg. "You ungrateful thing. After everything Gloria has done for you." I cried out as his hand found my back. My knees gave way. Hope screamed from inside the room. But Victor didn't stop. It was only when a neighbor banged on the wall that he finally left me lying on the cold cement floor, bleeding from my lip and trembling. That night, I didn't sleep. My swollen face throbbed, but my mind was louder. I knew too much now. Gloria couldn't know that I knew. If she suspected, I might not live to see the next sunrise. And worse, if they had their eyes on my unborn baby, I had to act.
Soon.
Very soon. The pain in my ribs had become dull, but persistent. I could still feel the bruise from Victor's last kick, spreading beneath my skin like spilled ink. The night was unusually quiet. Hope was curled beside me, fast asleep, her tiny hand resting on my swollen belly. I watched the moonlight slip through the crack in the wooden window. The silence stretched too long. It had weight. It made my thoughts loud. I didn't hear Victor and Gloria laughing like they used to. Maybe they had gone out again, or maybe they were scheming quietly somewhere. I closed my eyes, trying to escape the ache in my body and the ache in my spirit. But the thoughts came again. How did I get here? I had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, building a peaceful home, raising happy children. Now, I could barely feed the one I had. I was constantly walking on glass, praying I wouldn't say or do something that would make Victor angry enough to hit me again. And Gloria? There was something off. Something deeper than her polite voice and fake smiles. I remembered once, in our first year of marriage, how Victor refused to make any decision without asking his sister first. Even when I begged him to let us rent our own place, he said, "Let me ask Gloria first. She knows what's best." He always said that Gloria knows what's best. Then a memory returned, one I had buried under the weight of survival. It was a rainy evening. Victor had come home drunk and angry. I didn't know what triggered him, but he kept shouting, "All women are manipulators. You all want to control men, like Mama tried to control me." I had asked him once gently, "Did something happen to you when you were younger?" He flinched and then barked, "Don't ever ask me that again." Now, lying on that worn mat, I started to wonder, what really happened between Victor and Gloria growing up? What kind of sister holds such tight control over her brother, even into his marriage? Could it be that Victor wasn't always this cruel? Maybe he had been broken before I met him, shaped into the kind of man who hurts before he can be hurt. Gloria's words echoed in my mind. Victor is strong because I raised him right. I made him the man he is today. Raised him? Their mother was still alive then. And now Gloria was here, sitting in our house like a queen, pulling invisible strings. Everything began to connect in my head. Victor's obsessive need to control, his unpredictable anger, his refusal to show softness, even when I was bleeding or crying. It wasn't just me. He was fighting something, maybe even someone from long ago. And Gloria? She wasn't just a bystander.
No.
She was part of the sickness in this house. She fed it. She dressed it in calm voices and concerned glances, but underneath that mask was cold power. She enjoyed watching me squirm, helpless, afraid. Maybe she didn't want Victor to heal. Maybe she made sure he stayed broken, so she could always rule him. The floor creaked. I quickly closed my eyes and pretended to sleep as Gloria passed by the room. I could feel her shadow pause near the door. Her voice was soft. The little wife is sleeping early today." Then silence. I waited until her footsteps faded, then I opened my eyes and whispered to my unborn child, "Mama will protect you. I don't know how yet, but I will not let them break you too." A tear slid down my cheek. I felt alone in a house full of people. But now, I was beginning to understand the enemy, and I would not sleep again with both eyes shut. Not anymore. The day had barely begun when the fight erupted. The morning air was heavy, as if the sky itself had grown tired of watching the same pain unfold day after day. Hope was quietly nibbling leftover bread beside the window, her eyes too grown for a child so young. I was sweeping the sitting room, weak from lack of sleep, but my thoughts were sharper than ever. Victor had come home late again, smelling like beer and ash, and Gloria had served him food like a devoted wife. The sight alone turned my stomach. He didn't say a word to me. not even a glance. But I was done swallowing silence. I dropped the broom and looked up. "Victor, we need to talk." He raised his head slowly, the edge of irritation already tugging at his lips. "Talk about what?" Gloria glanced at me from the kitchen, her eyebrows lifted. "Grace, not every morning is meant for drama." I stepped forward. My knees were shaking, but I clenched my fists. "I am not here for drama. I'm here for the truth." Victor scoffed. "What truth are you talking about? You women always want to create problems where there is none." "No, Victor," I said, my voice low but steady. "I want to understand why you've become like this. Why you hate everything soft. Why you treat me like an enemy. I used to think it was me, but it's not. It started long before me." He stiffened. Gloria's spoon clattered in the sink. I continued, eyes locked on his. "Your sister made you this way. She didn't raise you, she hardened you. She filled you with fear of love, of vulnerability. You were a child, Victor, but she turned you into her soldier." Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Shut your mouth, Grace." But I didn't stop. I couldn't. All these years, you've been trying to control me, dominate me, crush my spirit. But you were the one crushed first. You've just been repeating what was done to you. "Are you mad?" he roared, marching toward me. Gloria tried to stop him, but her face was pale. I stood my ground. "I see you now, Victor. And I see her," I said, pointing at Gloria. "She hides behind her smiles and fake concern. But she's not your savior. She's your cage." That was when he hit me. His hand came down hard against my face, and I stumbled against the wall. My ears rang. My lips split. But even as I tasted blood, I stood back up. "You can beat me," I whispered, tears running down my cheeks. "But you can't beat the truth out of me anymore. If you believe no woman should suffer in silence, like and subscribe so we can tell her story too." "You ungrateful," Gloria started, stepping forward. I turned to her. "And you, Gloria, what are you so afraid of? That I'll wake him up? That he'll stop being your puppet? You're not a helper. You're a destroyer hiding in church clothes." Gloria's face twisted with something dark, something real. Victor looked at her, confused, unsettled. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. I walked away, holding my side where the pain throbbed like fire. I picked Hope up gently and whispered in her ear, "Let's go lie down, baby." As I passed them, I heard Gloria hiss, "You're letting her get into your head." But Victor said nothing. And for once, that silence was hers to fear. The rooster crowed as the sun filtered through the frayed curtains of our room. Hope stirred beside me, her fingers tangled in the hem of my wrapper. I gently brushed her hair from her forehead and kissed her cheek. Today was the day. I had wrapped the few belongings I could carry in a faded Kent cloth. It wasn't much, just a couple of clothes for Hope and me, a small bottle of rubbing oil, my hospital card, and the signed Safe Hope document which I had kept hidden beneath the mat. Gloria had gone to the market. Victor was out since dawn. That gave me the window I needed. As I walked out of the compound, I didn't look back. My belly was heavy, my back ached, and every step sent a jolt of pain through my side. But I walked with my head high, not as a victim, but as a woman choosing life, choosing sanity. My mother's house was 3 towns away, deep in the village, but it was a haven. When she opened the door and saw me, tears welled up in her eyes. "Grace, my daughter," she whispered, pulling me into her arms. She didn't ask too many questions. Not right away. She just fed me warm yam porridge and bathed Hope, and when the house grew quiet that evening, I finally spoke. "I'm not just running away, Mama. I'm fighting something. Something bigger than Victor, bigger than Gloria." She listened in silence as I explained what I had discovered about Safe Hope. Their orphanages, their clinics, even the sponsorship programs. It's not just charity, it's a mask. They're using children for experiments, for trade. I saw parents crying in forums. Some lost their babies. Mama clutched her wrapper tighter, crossing herself. "This is evil. What kind of wickedness is that?" "I was nearly one of them," I said, my voice trembling. But God kept opening my eyes. Now, I want to stop them, or at least warn others. In the days that followed, I visited the local women's clinic, then small orphanages nearby. I told my story cautiously, never revealing too much, but enough to awaken suspicion. Some women didn't believe me at first. Others asked quietly, "What should we do?" "Don't give your baby to just anyone," I would say. "Ask questions. Take names. Don't sign anything unless you understand it." At the well, in front of small kiosks, and even under mango trees where nursing mothers gathered, I would drop seeds of truth. "They offer free milk and medicine," I told a young mother one afternoon. "But nothing in this life is free without a cost." A woman with twins looked up. "My neighbor said her baby got sick after taking some supplement they gave her. The NGO people said it was normal. The baby died a month later." I nodded solemnly. "It's not just your neighbor." The more I spoke, the more women came to me quietly, curious and afraid. I began keeping a small notebook, documenting names, stories, locations. It was dangerous, I knew, but silence was deadlier. One evening, as I washed clothes behind Mama's house, she sat beside me and asked, "Do you think Victor will come looking for you?" I paused, wringing out Hope's wrapper. "He might, but I'm not the same woman he used to slap around in silence. I have something now that he doesn't understand." "What is that?" she asked. "Purpose," I said, "and the truth." Mama didn't reply, but she smiled faintly. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a woman who still had a fight left in her. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. And Safe Hope? They were going to regret ever trying to use me. The midday sun poured over the village like boiling oil. Children ran barefoot, laughing in the distance. But behind the church, under the shade of an old cashew tree, a different gathering was taking place. 7 women sat on wooden benches, their babies suckling or sleeping in wrappers tied to their backs. Grace stood before them, belly round, face radiant, yet firm, like someone who had seen fire and walked out of it alive. "They don't come with chains or guns," she told the women. "They come with smiles and promises. That's how they trap you." One of the women, Mama Joy, raised her hand. "You're talking about those Safe Hope people, right? They came last week to donate powdered milk. But I heard the neighbor's child went blind after using their free vitamins." "Yes," Grace nodded. "I've been gathering stories like that. It's not just in our village. It's in towns, clinics, even orphanages. Some babies fall sick and don't survive. And when the parents complain, they disappear or are silenced." The group grew quiet. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves and the buzzing of flies. "I'm not saying this to scare you," Grace continued. "I'm saying it so that we don't let ignorance destroy us." Mama Joy reached forward and touched her hand. "God bless you, my daughter. You're brave." "I wasn't always," Grace said quietly. "But pain wakes you up." As the meeting ended and the women scattered, Grace stayed behind to take notes. She had a small brown book now, filled with names, villages, symptoms, photos, evidence. Later that evening, back at Mama's house, her uncle arrived with a man Grace didn't recognize, tall, with a notebook and glasses. "This is Mr. David," her uncle said. "He's a journalist. A real one. From a private online network that investigates hidden corruption. I told him a bit of your story. He wants to know more." Grace's heartbeat quickened. "How much does he know?" "Enough to be afraid," David said, sitting. "We've been tracking Safe Hope for years. But every time we get close, someone in government shuts us down." "Why?" she asked. "Because Safe Hope is not just an NGO. They're protected. High-ranking officials are in their pocket. Some of your politicians, elected ones, have taken bribes to keep quiet or even push their agenda. It's bigger than you think." Grace looked away, anger bubbling inside her. "And Gloria?" David raised a brow. "Who's Gloria?" "My sister-in-law, a mobilizer for Safe Hope. She's planted in families like mine to watch, recruit, and report." "Then she's more dangerous than you realize," he said. "We believe some of these women serve dual roles, mobilizers and handlers. They build trust and then they deliver victims." Grace's hands trembled. She's living in my house, with my child. You have to be careful now, David said. They may come after you, especially if they realize you're not just another pregnant woman with complaints. I'm not, she said, her voice steel. I've seen too much to turn away now. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was Victor. She didn't answer, but the message flashed. Gloria is worried sick about you. Where are you hiding? You better come back before I come for you myself. David peered at the message. That's a threat. And a warning. You're getting too close. I'm not scared, Grace said. Let them come. As night fell, and the village turned quiet, Grace stood by the window, staring into the dark. She had no weapons, no money, no one in power, but she had truth. And truth, when spoken boldly, could shake even the tallest walls. Grace's story may be fiction, but it reflects the truth of so many lives. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to help us keep sharing voices that matter. To be continued.